So welcome. Maybe the winter break is over. Maybe it's only over at the end of the week. I don't know. But we continue with our weekly shir, the weekly Torah perspective. And this week, Parshas Vayechi, is the end of Sefer Bereishit. And it's a good time to take stock and to look back. What have we actually been learning in Sefer Bereishit? What is Sefer Bereishit all about? Now, you may know, you probably do know, that in general speech among the non-Jewish world, we don't refer to Bereishit as Bereishit, but we call it Genesis. The 5 books of Moses are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And you hear these words and you think, oh, that's Goyish. That's how the Goyim call it. We call it Bereishit, Shemos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. However, these names, Genesis, etc., are equally Jewish. The names of these 5 books are, the Gemara brings it in several places, Sefer HaYetzirah, which is Bereishit, Sefer HaYetziah, which is Exodus, the book of the going out of Egypt, Torah's Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim, which is Leviticus, about the tribe of Levi and the various halachot that refer to the priesthood and the Levitic duties. Then Sefer HaPekudim, the book of countings, which is Numbers, and Mishneh Torah, the repetition of the Torah, which is Deuteronomy, right? Because nomos is Greek for law, and Deutero means the second law, Mishneh Torah. So these words are absolutely acceptable, and we shouldn't be afraid to call things. Like we shouldn't be afraid to call HaKadosh Baruch Hu God. We mean the same thing. Actually, very often these days, when people ask me, how are you? I do not answer with Baruch Hashem, which is a phrase that has almost become meaningless because it's the standard answer. I like to shock people and I say, praise be unto the Almighty for his constant deeds of loving kindness. You can't say it more King Jamesy than that, but it means what it says. Whereas sometimes we, in our habits of being folkloristic, we forget what we're saying, right? So I am not ashamed to call it Genesis, but I also call it Bereishit. So Sefer Bereishit has other names. It's also called Sefer HaYoshar, the book of the upright, because it's the story of the creation of the Odom HaYoshar, of the straight man, the man as he is supposed to be. It starts in Parshas Bereishit when man is created, but man is not created complete. Man is created to become what he potentially can be. You see this most strikingly in the observation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, in the 2nd period of Bereishit, when God says, Lo tov heyos ha'odam levado, es elo ezer kenegdo. Now I would first of all play a little game with you. And I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer that question as it comes in mind immediately when you hear the question. Just immediately answer with comes in mind. After God has observed that it's not good for man to be alone, what did he do next? Pinchas.
Created an connector for him.
Shimmy.
Did a bit of business with the rib.
Chaimon.
Put him to sleep.
All right, so you haven't listened to Parshas Bereishit. So let's look. Let's look what it actually says in the 2nd period in Bereishit, which starts with the Friday night recitation of Vayechi, etc. But then Vayechi Hashem Elohim es ha'adam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, formed, not he created, he formed Vayechi, the man, Ofer minu adama, dust from the earth, Vayipach ba'apov nishmas chaim, and he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, Vayehi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, and man became a living being. Then God plants a beautiful garden, and it has rivers, and it's all a beautiful description. Vayikach, in Pasuk Tes Vov, which is verse 15, Vayikach Hashem Elokim es ha'adam, Vayanichehu began Eden le'ovdo u'leshomro. And he took man and he put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. Two different expressions, le'ovdo u'leshomro. One is positive, to work it. The other one is negative, to preserve it from danger. This, of course, corresponds to our well-known division of the divine commandments in mitzvahs aseh and mitzvahs los aseh. There are things that we should do, and there are things that we should refrain from doing, positives and negatives. Le'ovdo, positive, u'leshomro, negative. And then, Vayetzav Hashem Elokim al ha'odom lemar. Then God gave man a commandment. Or rather, he started commanding man. Vayetzav Hashem Elokim al ha'odom lemar. And what did God say? Mikol eitz hagan ochal tochel, me'etz hadas tov v'ro. Lo sochel mimenu, ki v'yam acholcha mimenu, maus tomus. So, again, we'll play a little game. What is the commandment of God regarding the tree? Penny.
Don't eat from. Don't approach it,
Shimmy.
or you die.
The tree, there's no specific command.
Don't touch it.
Say the pasuk again, please.
Ah! There we go. Vayetzav Hashem Elokim al ha'odom lemar, mikol eitz hagan ochal tachel,
All the trees.
self pasuk, ume'etz hadas tavoro, lo sochel mimenu, ki v'yam acholcha mimenu maus tomus. Acholcha, of the day that you will eat from it,
You die.
you will die.
So positive, eat from the other ones, and negative, don't eat from that one.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov. You listen to the pasuk. There are two commandments here, and there is a self-pasuk, is a seizure between two psukim, the end of one verse and the beginning of another verse. So there is a mitzvah aseh, we call eitz hagan ochal tochel, and it is emphatic. You certainly should eat.
Should eat.
And then it is actually, but ume'etz hadas tov, but from the tree, which I call the tree of knowledge of good and evil, however you translate that, that's a different subject. Lo sochel mimenu. Don't. It almost sounds like don't eat from it. Not there, you shouldn't eat from it. No, the emphasis is on eat from all the trees. But, side remark, don't eat from this tree. Why? Ki v'yam acholcha mimenu, on the day that you will die from it, you will become a mortal being. Now, but there it actually spells out the consequence. Whereas on the first part of the commandment, you should eat, it doesn't spell a consequence. Well, this is the reason why it has to come with emphasis. Do eat, although I'm not telling you why. And when it comes to don't eat, don't eat from it. And it is like a pack of cigarettes that says, if you smoke, these are the consequences. It is not so much don't smoke. If smoking would be forbidden, well, it's forbidden in certain places, but you can smoke if you so wish to do, but it's your choice. You should know the consequences. This whole eating from the tree is a very mysterious business, because it's not even clear which tree it is, because there are two trees. There is the Eitz HaChaim B'Sel Hagan. Earlier it says the tree of life was in the middle of the garden, and then like an afterthought, we're Eitz Hadas Tovarang, and also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Whether it's two different trees, or the opinions are so many opinions. One says the lower part is called the Eitz HaChaim, and the Eitz Hadas Tovarang, and the higher part is the Eitz HaChaim. It almost seems it's the same tree, but you should see it in two different lights. By the way, the connection between these two trees also follows from the gematria. Very interesting and definitely not a coincidence. The gematria of Eitz HaChaim adds up to 233. The gematria of Eitz Hadas Tovorah adds up to 932, which is exactly 4 times as much. It's the difference between 1 and 4. This 1-4 proportion is even in the name of Odom, which is 1-4-40, Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Earlier in this perek you have the mysterious damp that rises from the ground in the beginning, right? And that damp is called Aid, Aleph, Dalet, 1-4. There is a river that streams from Gan Eden, from the Garden of Eden, and as it streams out, it splits into 4 different rivers. This 1-4 proportion, there's something going on here. The name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is written with 4 letters, but we say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, He is one, right? So there's something going on with the 1 and 4. The simple thing here is that the 4 different ways that you can look at things should be combined into one single perspective where you can see their underlying unity. You find so many sayings of our sages in Pirkei Avos, for example, that say things in 4 different ways, right? Ezu Chochem, Ezu Gibor, Ezu Oshia. There's also 4 different things being said there. I digress. This is not our subject. The subject here that I wanted to bring to your attention, I couldn't resist going into this business with the trees, but later on, Vayomer Hashem Elokim, immediately afterwards, by the way, Lo tov hayos ha'odom levado, eselo eze kenekta, and you all said, and the next thing that God did was a big operation, bringing Odom into a deep sleep and taking a rib and fashioning the woman out of him. It's not what happened. Listen to what it actually says. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim minu adoma kol chayas hasodeh, all the animals of the field, kol auf hashomayim, and all the birds of the sky, vayovei el ha'odom, and he brought them to man, liraos ma yikrolo, to see what man should call him, b'chol asher yikrolo ha'odom nefesh chayo hu shemau, and any name that man would give to the living beings, that would be its name. We know that our sages, in fact, make a very weird comment on this. You will find it in the Mefarshim quoted. The Medrash says that Odom attempted to have sexual relations with all the animals, a kind of London Zoo bordello scenario. Imagine man and a rhinoceros, or man and it's clearly an absurd statement, and it shouldn't be taken as such.
Literal.
But what is going on is sexual relations are also called das. And of course, das is something that plays a role in this entire story. What is this knowledge, right? We still have the expression in English, carnal knowledge. He has knowledge of her, means he sleeps with her. So this knowledge is exploring the connection between two things. That's das, means to connect, to intimately know. It is the integrated thought. We have other words for thought. We have chokhmah, we have bina, and then we have das. Chokhmah is inspiration. Bina is deliberation. Lahavin dover mitach dover, to understand one thing in contrast with the other thing. Das is integrating those two sorts of knowledge. This non-verbal chokhmah, this verbalized bina, and it becomes das. It becomes knowledge that is applicable. It can be used. It comes now down from the mental world into the world of action. It's the interface between thought and action. That's called das. Okay. The question then is here, how is man to act in the world? Where are his partners in his task to become what he should become, what he is capable, what his potential is. And this is another piece of mistranslation that we find in many, many attempts to translate the Holy Tongue. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, the Holy One said, Lo tov hayos ha'odom levado, and we all translate it as if it says, Lo tov lo odom lihiyos levado. It is not good for man to be alone. You read translations, you always, it's not good for man to be alone. It's not what it says. Hayos ha'odom is like sus hamelech. Hayos ha'odom is a smichus. It's a connection in Hebrew. You put two words next to each other. One is called a somech, the other one is called a nismach. One leans against the other word. That's what smichus means, two leaning words. And here, hayos and odom are two leaning words. And it's the hayos of the odom. What is hayos? Doesn't mean being. Nobody needs help to just be. You know, I'm sitting here, I am. The word lihios in Hebrew never means simply being. If you want to say, Charles is the king, in English you have is in between, an expression of being. In Hebrew, you say David Melech. David Melech Yisrael Bazman Hahu. David was the king of Israel in those days. You have no need to use this word to be in Hebrew, unless you want to say something else. Vayechi b'mei Achashverosh. Vayechi b'mei Achashverosh. It doesn't mean it was. What was in the days of Achashverosh? No. It means it happened. It became. It took place. Likewise, in the second pasuk in Bereishit, it says, the earth was chaotic and empty, or whatever you want to translate. I don't translate it that way, but anyway. I want to concentrate on these words, it does not mean the earth was. There's a good way in Hebrew to say that, simply leave out the verb to be. Or if you want to, you can say, Vatehi ha'oretz tohu. Although that doesn't mean and the earth was, it means the earth became. Hoiso means had become. So it says there in the beginning, when after God created heaven and earth, and the earth had become chaotic but full of potential, and there was darkness on deepness. By the way, there is never the deep. It doesn't say hatahom, it says tahom. And the Spirit of God, it's not the Spirit of God. Ruach in Hebrew means also wind, right? So what does Ruach Elohim mean? Why is in Hebrew the word Ruach means both wind and spirit? Well, it doesn't mean wind or spirit, depending on the circumstances. We translate it as wind or spirit, depending on the circumstances. In Hebrew, it simply is one word, Ruach, right? So it's not that the Hebrew has two meanings, it's that the full meaning of the word Ruach in English needs two different words. What does a wind and a spirit have in common? They both are movers. The wind moves things by blowing at them, and the Spirit of God moves things by blowing on it. One is a spiritual blowing, the other one is a physical blowing, but there's no difference. It means propeller. It means an agent of movement, of force. That is Ruach. So, that Ruach Elohim merachos al pnei hamayim. And only then the story starts. Vayomer Elohim yihi'al. Then God, after this whole scenery is set by the words of the Torah, the world has been created, the earth had become chaotic but full of potential, and there were two opposite forces. There was darkness on deepness, but on the other hand there was the Spirit of God driving things. And now this Spirit of God is going to speak. By the way, that's also called Ruach Piv. It's called the mover that by language, and God creates the world by language, by saying things. And then the narrative starts with Vayomer Elohim yihi'al. Then God said, let there be light, etc. Okay. That's by the by. The thing about this creation of the help that man needs in order to become what he potentially is, the Heyos Odom, the becoming of man, is something that cannot be done in isolation. It must be done in relationships. No man is an island, as the expression goes, but you need to find yourself in a context. God could have said, you know what your context is? I'm going to operate on you, I'm going to create a wife for you, and you should take her. She is your... This doesn't work. How does he know that she is what he needs? He needs to find out who is he and what can he become in the first place. So God creates a natural environment for him. After all, he is an animal. Amos, are you really saying that Judaism teaches that man is an animal? Yes, the Torah says it, because it says when God blew the breath of life in man's nostril, he made him into a nefesh chayo, a living being. And here, when it says, Vayechi Hashem Elokim minu adomo kol chayas hasodeh, when God created all the beasts of the field, as called Alf Hashemayim, and all the birds of the heaven, Vayovei el ha'odom liraos ma yikrolau, and he brought him to man to see what he would call it, v'chol asher yikrolau ha'odom nefesh chayo, that he used to possess before. He finds himself. In Jewish practice, before you get married, when you say the grace after meals, and you come to the later section of the Horachamons, that the All-Merciful should bless this, and should bless that, and should do this, and should do that. We also say, Horachamon hu yivorech as Ovimori, as Imi Morosi, he should bless my father, my teacher, my mother, who teaches me. You never mention yourself until you get married. Then you say, Horachamon hu yivorech ausi as ishti, as Ovi, as Imi. Right? There is no self before this marriage. There is no Osi, I myself, before you find that helpmate. Now, this was the beginning of Sefer Bereishit. Now we come to the end of Sefer Bereishit, Parshas Vayechi. And this comes after a long, long story. It starts the story of mankind once he leaves this paradise, this Garden of Eden, however we understand that. Gan, by the way, the Hebrew word gan and the English word garden have to do with to guard, right? Morgain is a shield. So a gan is a secluded, protected environment. But he's no longer in that protected environment, he's now in the world. By the way, he is blocked. The way back to the Garden of Eden, where the tree of life is blocked. By what? By Kruvim, by these angel beings with flaming swords. So the Eitz HaChaim is, you can't get to the Eitz HaChaim because they are blocked by Kruvim, cherubs, right? Cherubs are not little fat boys with little wings and a lack of clothing. No, they are fiery beings, but they do symbolize a relationship between man and wife, between the opposite sexes, because we find them back, these Kruvim, in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, where they are on top of the Ark, on top of the Or HaKodesh. What's inside the Or HaKodesh? There lies our Torah. What is this Torah? What is this revelation of God called? It's called Eitz Chaim Hile Machazikim Bo. There is an Eitz Chaim protected by Kruvim on one side of the story. There is an Eitz Chaim protected by two Kruvim on the other side of the story. One says, you can't come here, and the other one says, but here it is. And by the way, it's the place from which God speaks to his people. We call him Yoshev HaKruvim, the one who sits on the Kruvim, and he speaks from between the Kruvim. It says so literally when God says, this is the place that I will speak to you, he says it's to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses our teacher. Okay, So we have two bookends of a story that goes into the next Sefer, into Shemos, where we learn about these Kruvim. But there's another bookend. There's the beginning of the story of man inside the world in which he now has to live. And it starts with the murder. It starts with two brothers. And one is jealous of the other for whatever reason. We're not going to go into the details. But Cain kills Abel. Cain kills Abel. And it ends with brothers. Sefer Bereishit ends with brothers who tried to kill, this time it was 10 against 1, who tried to kill their brother. But they intended evil, but God steered it towards the good. As Joseph himself says, don't you worry that you sold me to Mitzrayim. God has taken care of it, and it's all part of the plan. But do me a favor. It's not a nice story. Bereishit is not a nice story. It is about rivalry. It's about building a family. It's about conflict. And the conflict between brothers is a recurring theme. It happens time and time and time again. There is Ishmael and Yitzchak. There is already, midrashically, the story of Avram and his brothers Nochar and Horon. Horon, who died when he tried to imitate Avram. He set back, Avram was risking his life for the truth of the worship of one God. And when Avram was successful, Horon said, let me jump on the bandwagon, and he jumped also in the fire and he burned. It doesn't mean that he's lost forever, because his two children, one married Avram, one daughter married Avram, and the other daughter married Nochar. And we descend, therefore, from all three sons of Terach, of Avram, of Nochar, and of Horon, in more than one way. I mean, Lod, the son of Horon, gave us Rus HaMalviot, who is the mother of the Messianic family of the Malchus Beis David. So it's a very intricate story. But it is punctuated by rivalry between brothers. You see a similar phenomenon in Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafes, where there is also a conflict. Now 2 brothers against 1. Shem and Yafes opposed the way that Ham treated his father. Again, not now the time to go into the details, but there's clearly something going on with brothers. There's clearly something going on also with being firstborn. And that will be the subject of the next part of my shiur.